he tracked every U.S. president and their relationship to the UFO experience, and he's gone through files and archives. He's dug up the dirt, and he's exposed a large understanding of what's really going on behind the scenes, and he keeps going for it. He is one of the top investigators on the disclosure phenomenon. He's someone I go to see the latest information, what's really happening, what's happening behind the scenes. So today's talk, UFOs, weird stuff, and the theory of wow. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's give Grant Camera a big, big hand. Thank you, Grant.
Thanks, Alan. This is a new presentation. I gave it last week in Vancouver, but this is something new, and I'm doing a new one next month in Nevada on a second download that I got about a year ago. But today I'm going to do something completely strange about what I think the intelligence is actually doing. And I've been thinking about this for a number of years, and then it all just sort of came together. But first, people want to know about the disclosure thing, because you know I've been involved with Ron Pandolfi and the CIA and Kit Green and all these guys. I've been chasing these guys. And I've written 3 books on them and the operations and this gradual disclosure thing that they've been dropping stuff into the UFO community for whatever reason. A lot of people were following the To the Stars thing, and I got involved, and then Tom DeLonge said I wasn't on the inside, and I'm putting out misrepresentations of what they're doing. But I have done a lot of work on this sort of stuff, and I'm only going to do a little bit because it's not really that important, the stuff. They are busy doing their thing, and I'm busy doing my thing. I think what I'm going to talk about once I do this first couple of slides is much more important than what the government does or does not do, because in the end, when you die, you're not going to be able to explain that I didn't do a damn thing because the government did this or that. I mean, it's personal. You're going to have to answer for yourself what you did with what you were supposed to do. So this New York Times story broke, and I had a book called Managing Magic, where I actually talk about this before it was actually done. It was earlier, about 6 months before the Tom DeLonge news conference. I have maybe 75 pages on Tom DeLonge. I actually talk about what's about to happen, and basically everything I said would happen actually happened. So this game is still being played here, and they're still leaking documents. So this is a phenomenon, and I have a radio show tomorrow night, so I'm not going to talk about it much today, but I have a radio show called The Cameron Files on KGRA, and tomorrow night I have 4 people. There's about 10 people on the inside who watch all the machinations of what's going on. I have 4 of them on tomorrow night, and we're going to talk about the latest set of documents that have been leaked into the UFO community, and they appeared on Chris Mellon. If you know the To the Stars Academy, Chris Mellon is one of the director guys on. He was a former intelligence guy with the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Secretary of Defense and stuff. And on his website, and we've confirmed this, they put these documents on his website. And the story was, well, he put them on his website and then he accidentally sent them, and it's the same thing. It's this sort of a garbage story that sort of covers what they're doing. This is a back, I don't know what they call it. You go back and you can see the site, but you can actually see on here the images. So the images were pulled off because the site has been pulled down, locked or whatever. And a bunch of these documents appeared. So in the since August the 8th, there's been 40 new documents, 40 pages of documents that have been leaked in the UFO community. And now we have a situation where the UFO people who've got them, now they're covering them up and they're saying, well, this got confidential information. And I'm pushing, and it's basically the end of the story is, it's the same shit, different day. It's the same story that happened with Disney in '56, with Bob Emenegger in the '70s, Bill Moore, Stanton Friedman in the 1980s, the Woods in the 1990s. It's the same story. They put it out, they pull it back. They put it out, they pull it back. And the documents are all altered. So one of the key documents that they actually had was, if you know the story, if you're following the To the Stars thing, Lou Elizondo comes out, he says, I resigned I was upset with the government, I resigned because they weren't doing the UFO thing, and I joined Tom DeLonge's operation, and we're going to try to get this story out. And of course, everybody started to pressure him. Well, where's your resignation letter from the Secretary of Defense? He resigned to Mattis, the Secretary of Defense. So everybody's putting this pressure, and one of the documents that ended up on this Mellon site that suddenly got leaked, and a guy off Twitter grabbed all these documents, and then they sort of cycled around. I've got a couple of them, but people are withholding these documents. One of them is Lou Elizondo's letter, resignation letter. And because they were under pressure to release this letter. So the letter comes and I said to my buddy, whose name is Buddy, who's going to be on my show tomorrow night, I said, Buddy, let me see the resignation letter. Give me a copy of the resignation letter. And the first thing I look for, and what you do when you look at these documents, you look for a mistake, because this is how they do it. So the resignation letter comes out, and I look at it, and it took me like 5 seconds to see the mistake. Lou Elizondo writes a resignation letter to the Undersecretary of Defense, or to the Secretary of Defense, and he doesn't put a date on it. The document's missing a date. And I said, Buddy, come on, there's no date on this thing. He's not gonna, well, maybe he forgot to put it on. And it's the same game. It's like, oh, well, the document's real, but he forgot to do this, he forgot to do that. So all you have to do is go to Google and you memo Secretary of Defense. They've all got dates on them. You can go through one after another. And I pulled a bunch of them here and everything's got a date on it. The other thing is, the title is Deferred Retirement and he spells it wrong. And then they say, well, his spelling isn't that good. He spelled it. I said, no, it's the same thing. You take a real document, you make alterations, it's plausible deniability, you put the document out, and then you say, when you come to confront the government, they say, that's a phony document. It's a phony document, yes, but it's the same, it's the real material. So they're putting the material out. Peacetime, there's grammar mistakes, there's all these sort of things. And then they gave me another one with the Nimitz. If you know the Nimitz story, there's a woman, a pilot, who has this long interview with her, and she gets into real detail about the object that was under the water and all this kind of stuff. Same thing, there's all these mistakes. The title is misspelled, and this is basically how they do it. So I said, well, Buddy, it's the same thing. You're the new Messiah. I call these people the Messiah. They come to you and they say, we're from the government. We're here to help you. And it's like, yeah, really. And you become the Messiah. You're out there and you're spreading this stuff into the community, and you're basically helping them do their job. And so you had this, and then you have this, hang on, we're going the wrong way here. Quotation marks, he forgets. Then this piece of material was leaked. This is all the technical studies that are being done by Hal Puthoff's organization in Austin, Texas. Then there's these videos. So they released the videos. The videos that you've seen, they were released as well on this Chris Mellon site. And you see the pictures of them. And then this one is the important one. They show a photograph. And I talked to the guy on Twitter, and I talked to Buddy, and I said, well, why are you withholding this? There's no classified material on here. And what it is it's a picture of a white padded bag with www.securitybag.com on it, and it's from Lou Elizondo sending it to Chris Mellon. The key is that this document bag is sent to Chris Mellon a month before the news conference. And the whole thing is Lou Elizondo didn't retire till the day before. So already a month before he retires, he's sending stuff to Chris Mellon. And you can go, it's the same game. It's these people on the inside who are the plausible deniability. And the key thing, one of the people that's going to be on my show at the end of the month, I'm doing an election show, and I have the guy who asked Hillary Clinton the question, the big UFO question from New Hampshire. They're coming to New Hampshire. He asked her the question, and she talks about it. So when this happened, when this To the Stars thing broke, I went to Damon Steers, the guy, and I said, Damon, you got to file an FOIA, you're a reporter, this is a big story, you can grab this to get the documents and whatever. And of course, he immediately goes the same day or the day after the story breaks in the New York Times, Washington Post, and Politico. It was 3 newspapers, not one. And they all ran the same morning, which means it was planned to do. You don't do a 2-month story and they all go the same day. He contacts the public affairs person at the Pentagon, and Harris, she says, I can absolutely assure you we did not release videos. And so it's the old deal. So the videos come out, and then you can't track it down. It's been the same story for 70 years. Put the material out, then we try to go get it, and you try to get the documents on the ATIP program, and then they say, no records. There's no records, we don't know about this, we don't know what you're talking about, and all this stuff is leaked in the UFO community. So this material is still going, and Buddy even told me, and these people, I don't know, they sort of fall for the idea that this stuff is actually real, or that they're actually, real documents. Buddy tells me he's in New York City, he's got his truck, and he says he's going to his truck, and there's a guy putting something on the front of his truck. And so he starts going faster, and this guy runs off, jumps in a car, somebody else is driving, and he drives off, and Buddy picks up these 2 envelopes off his windshield, and they have the old thing where they tie the loop on the back with the red string thing, these old envelopes from the 80s or whatever, and it's like all these UFO documents. And they're from another country, and I'm saying, well, you got to release this. And finally I convinced him. I said, if someone comes to you, and I say to everybody, Somebody comes to you and say, I got information, classified information, and I'm going to tell you. The whole deal is, the whole idea is to obey the law and uphold the Constitution. So the first question you should ask somebody is, why are you not in jail? I mean, if this is classified material and you're coming to tell me, why are you not in jail? So this is the whole deal, is this material is leaked out by people who come out and say, I've got this highly secret material, it's classified, the government's trying to kill me, and all this kind of stuff. And I always say, if the government wanted to kill you, you're dead in 29 minutes. They're not going to miss. They're not going to miss the shot. And so I told the guy, I said, you go, and that's what you have to do. Is if you get somebody gives you documents, you immediately go to the FBI. Finally convinced them to go to the FBI and hand the documents, and then file an FOIA on what the documents really mean. Then you've got it under control. The FBI's got it. You file the FOIA, and you force the documents as to what the opinion on. So this stuff is going on, and it's the same thing. I've sort of gotten tired of playing the game, but I sort of keep up with this kind of stuff. Here's some project notes, but there's a lot of stuff. There's about 40 pages of material that most people haven't seen. And I'm asking these researchers, why are you not talking about this? This is why I'm having this show tomorrow night. Get these guys on and say, well, you know, this stuff's floating around. Why aren't you guys talking about it? Why aren't you releasing the documents? Now, To the Stars has started a new thing, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, about the medals. You've heard the story about the medals. They've got these medals. People are handing these medals. They've got 7 pieces of metal. The budget is $35,000. And a lot of people who've got UFO material are handing it in to get it analyzed. And they give you an insurance policy, and they take it, and then they hand it back to you or whatever. So they called it the ATOM program, and I hate acronyms. I just absolutely hate them. I'm like, why don't you just call it what it is? So I decided, okay, I'm going to get my own acronym. And this is this new thing that I'm going to talk about today. So it's called the TUTO program, the theory of wow. And this is my idea. What is the intelligence doing? And I suddenly came to the conclusion that maybe what they're just doing is really nothing. They're not here to eat our kids or rape our women or steal the gold or anything. They're just here to make us go, wow. And when you look at this stuff, you may not agree with it, but you go, well, maybe. So it was called the theory of wow. And there's a commercial that actually describes exactly what I think is going on. Here's the commercial that was played a number of years ago. And this is what I think is actually going on.
They're really biting today, Don.
It's all about the lure. Dude?
And I think it's about time.
Oh, they're really biting today, Sorek. Yeah, it's all about the lure.
Refreshingly smooth Bud Light. Always worth it.
Hey, dude, take my picture.
And I came to sort of realize when I was, because I've done this since 1975. I've been down the rabbit hole since 1975. And I started to see that this pattern started to appear. And so what I said is maybe the metals really inspired it. Because what I'm going to get into is all the pieces of metal are different. There are no two pieces. And there are a lot of metal. I mean, you could build a 747 from the metal that everybody has. There's a lot more metal than you think it is. But none of the pieces are the same. So the question is, why are the pieces all different? If it's this technology, and why does it come across galaxy? Skeptics always bring it comes across the galaxy and then it crashes. And it breaks into these little tiny pieces that people can put in their pocket and take home. It doesn't, so I'm thinking, maybe it has nothing to do with the craft. Maybe, and I'll show you, maybe it's like you take the isotopes and you just say, let's give them something that looks really weird. Throw this out, give them this piece of metal with the isotopes, and they go, oh, this is pretty cool. And everybody's like, they're citing. So I put it like in classes. So I say, maybe on a foreign planet, this is just a science fair project for the classes. So the grade 1 class will be doing the simplest thing. Lights. Why do UFOs have lights on them? So you can see them. We don't have lights on our crafts. We don't have lights on our planes. So why have they got lights? And and I've had enough cases that I've done through the years, they're all different. John Lennon's, I always tell the story of John Lennon. John Lennon had these white lights going flash, 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 flash. They're alternating flashing lights around with a red light on top. And I say, do you really need flashing white lights on the end of your flying saucer to fly through interstellar space? And you look at all these different cases, and almost every UFO is basically different. And I'll show you a little more about that later. So we don't have lights on our craft. Like when we went to get bin Laden with the stealth helicopters, SEAL Team 6, best guys you got. Did we leave the lights on when we went in there? No, you turned the lights off. And yet when you get the 1975, that's when my incident occurred. That's when Travis Walton incident occurred. When Travis Walton had his abduction, before and after, they had these things with the NORAD sightings along the Canadian-US border. So you had these at Loring Air Force Base, Worth Smith Air Force Base, Minot, which is south of me in North Dakota, and Malmstrom. They had the UFOs coming in to the weapons storage area where they kept the nuclear weapons, because this was all the Strategic Air Command bombers that were being stationed there, and they would go inside and they would have the lights on. So if you're going to go in, why don't you turn the lights off? Because they want you to see it. And they're going, hello, we're over here, can you see us? Turn up the light, you can't see us. And they're doing this sort of thing, and it seemed very obvious. If you see a UFO, you're part of the game. It's not a random event. And that's part of the lecture I'm going to give next month, was these download things. Is it random? Is it not random? Is the world consciousness? Is it material? Is it one life? Is it multiple lives? All these things, 24 things came into my head, one after another. And that's one of the things. We assume that UFO sightings are random events. And I maintain they are not random events. If you see it, it's like when I first saw my UFO in '75, the second night I saw it, it came right at us the second night and then flew away. And I'm looking at it going, what the heck's it doing? And it's like, it was just flying along. So they actually had a joke in the town. They said it was going for a beer run. It didn't seem to be doing anything. It was just flying along. And the question was, are you at the wrong place in the wrong time or the right place at the right time? Or are you part of this thing? So if it's multiple lives, if it's reincarnation, then it's not a random event. It's experience. That you chose to do this, you chose to do that. And you may be part of this experience, part of this game, because you chose to be part of this game. It's not a random event. So I look at that sort of thing, and you see these crafts, and it was quite apparent, the Nimitz. The Nimitz, it goes on, is not a random event. It's not, the Nimitz was there and the UFO flew by and the fighters went up. It was there for a week. It was there for a week. It's like, here we are, and then fly under the water, do this, do that. And there's new evidence that is coming out that shows that in 2015, there was events off the east coast of that with these, they're going to get some of these videos. There was 15 events, and they were all multiple events as well, where they went on for days and days and days, almost like they're making a message. They want you to see them, and then they do the weird thing, like, let's show them something really weird. So the pilots are going, and then they say, guess what? The thing just moved 20 miles. It's where you're supposed to be in 15 minutes. And it moves like instantaneously to where they're supposed to be, and they're going, how did it know where we're going to go? And they're doing that kind of stuff. They're just going, wow. The person's going, how does this work? How does this go? Because the thing is, the same as the government. If the government wanted you to know what's going on, they'd stand the President of the United States up and they'd tell you what's going on. If they wanted to, quote, completely cover up, they would do what they do in Canada. They would just shut up. I have no idea what the Canadians are doing. I have no idea, because they would just shut up. The aliens are doing, the intelligence, whatever they are doing the same thing. They're not landing on the White House lawn and telling you what's going on, and they're not covering up, because if they were to cover up, they would turn off the lights. Because in the abduction scenario, you don't see them. They can cloak themselves anytime they want, so when they're not cloaking themselves, it would be apparent they want you to see them. They want you to see it, and they do spectacular things, weird things. So the Rendlesham Forest, same thing. Rendlesham Forest went on for at least 3 days, maybe 4 days. You take the Skinwalker Ranch thing, and there you have the situation where George Knapp didn't see a single thing. John Alexander, who was one of the key people, didn't see a single thing over the 7 years. There's 100 incidents in 6 years. DIA people all saw it. And the DIA people volunteered to go in there. They wanted to go in and study this paranormal. So the whole thing started as paranormal, not UFO. And then it moved to UFO. They went to Reed got the material. So the question is, who saw the most stuff at Skinwalker Ranch? And it was Dr. Eric Davis saw the most stuff. And so Eric Davis, if you hear his story, he has his PhD, gets in astrophysics, and his PhD party in 1989 or something, he has this UFO in plain daylight with him and his wife, and the thing flies over, and they're totally fascinated. Nobody else sees this, just he and his wife see this thing, and it's he who sees all the stuff at Skinwalker Ranch. And the same as Erica Lukes earlier in this conference talked about, when she went to Skinwalker Ranch, she saw stuff. So the question is it a random event that everybody would see because they went to Skinwalker Ranch, or is it that an experiencer goes to Skinwalker Ranch and brings the phenomena? Is it the experiencer causing the phenomena, or is it just a random phenomena that people happen to see? I would look, and the data seems to indicate that the experiencer has part, the person on the ground has part. It's almost like John Wheeler, who won the Nobel Prize, the guy that came up with the idea of black holes, wormholes, said it's a participatory universe. You have to realize that you're part of what's manifesting around you. So and then Eric Davis talks about this hitchhiker, and they turned it into sort of an evil thing. Oh, it's this hitchhiker thing, and it follows the DIA guys home, and it follows Eric Davis home. Again, it basically shows that it's the experiencer. It's not that there's a random phenomena, and Eric Davis happened to be there, and then the thing followed him home. It was that Eric Davis is an experiencer, and this stuff is always going to follow him around. It's part of his life. It's sort of got it backwards. So all the DA people saw it. There's an action incident. The CIA was involved, FBI was involved, the Canadian government was involved, all these people, they channeled an alien, and if you want to look at, there's a documentary on YouTube called UFOs That Has Begun. It tells this story. It was leaked by the CIA to my friend Bob Emenegger. This story tells about them channeling an alien at the National Photographic Interpretation Center, where the CIA analyzed all the U-2 and SR-71 stuff, and this woman taught the guy how to channel this thing. So the guy goes to the CIA, and they do this channeling, and Art Lundahl, who is the head of the Weird Desk, the CIA desk, UFO desk at the CIA, said, we want you to prove yourself. And what do you want? The guy's channeling. What do you want? What do you want? If, we want you to show yourself. Okay, and they said, go to the window. And this flying saucer flies by the window. And there was, Jacques Vallée gave me the document that sort of backed this up, the memo. And it seems to be a true story. When she taught him to do this in '59, the guy came back in 1980. And he said, you got to get rid of these guys. I mean, they're all around me. I can't get rid of them. It's like the hitchhiker. They're trying to get rid of me. And she said, I told you not to deal with those people. You didn't listen to me. And I don't know whether she made these beings go, but it's this hitchhiker phenomenon, but it's connected to the person, not to some random event. So grade one, this is what I'm saying, because I've been in this since before Jesus was a carpenter, and I know that what happened in the past did not happen now. People always think what's happening now always happened. It didn't. This phenomenon, most people don't even know what it is. It happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s all the time in UFO sightings. Never happens anymore. It's called angel hair. The UFO would fly over, all this sort of web stuff would come down, hang off the trees. People would recover it and try to analyze it, but it would melt. It would just sort of disintegrate right away. And some of this stuff was actually sent by the CIA into the Canadian government to be analyzed. So you see these phenomena. So it's like, why are they dropping angel hair? They're dropping angel hair. So people go, wow, what is this? And they're just making you think. They're making you go, what the hell is going on? And instead of coming to you and say, we are from another planet, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's, and we want you to change your religion, and we want you to do this, and you just take a gun and say, get the hell out of here, and you're ready to shoot them. So they're coming with a different technique than we use when we go into another country. The story of Bud Hopkins. You think these are all random events. In the Bud Hopkins story, if you realize what happened to Bud Hopkins, he was actually, I think, a 7-year-old kid when the War of the Worlds took place, and his parents were freaking out. This radio show was going on. His parents are freaking out. The next door neighbor comes with his guns, and he said, we're going to the top of the hill. We want you to join us. We're going to defend this country against these evil invaders and stuff. And Bud's parents didn't go, but his mother was crying. Bud is looking out the window, and he's all upset. And then in 1964, he sees a sighting. And if you listen to the audio of Bud telling this sighting, this flying saucer sitting above his car with these people from Great Britain, and he's just absolutely fascinated. And he's looking at this thing, and the thing's just hovering above the car. And he's looking at it, and it's looking at him. And then he goes the next day, and he redrives the route. How long did it take? How long was the thing there? And he becomes obsessed. He starts reading UFO books. And then in 1975, the kicker is, 1975, the same year that I had my experience, Travis Walton, all this other stuff happened in 75, highest level of cattle mutilations in history in 75. Bud is going to buy his booze at the corner drugstore, or the corner liquor store, and the guy says to him, oh, Bud, he said, I had this weird experience last night. He says, I was driving along, and there was this flying saucer that landed just off the 100 yards off the 100 feet or 100 yards off the road, and these aliens were out, and they had shovels, and they were digging holes. And Bud went, they were? So Bud goes and checks, and sure enough, there's 15 holes 5 inches deep. Now Bud's down the rabbit hole. He's going, holy cow, these aliens are digging holes. And so he goes to the guy. There's a condo complex, and there was a guard, and he asked the guard, did you see anything going on in that field? And the guy said, yeah, I saw that thing. And Bud is down, and suddenly Bud's doing abduction research, and he's trying to figure out how this thing works. And you think it's a random event, and you see this almost like they're dragging people in, which is almost like grade 2. I'll get into. Jacques Vallée had a sighting, dramatic sighting with his father in 1955, and he fell down the rabbit hole. Steve Murillo, I'll sort of skip this because I'm going to run out of time. Steve Murillo is outside the door here. Steve Murillo had a sighting. He's a Navy pilot. And this thing flew over, and I asked him, do you think it was a random event? Because it did weird things. It came right over him, made his wife go down and get a glass of wine, so she wasn't there when it happened. And then it comes by, and then it does this very sort of weird, 2 of them fly off out of this V formation and then flip back in again. And he's impressed. He goes, whoa, man, look at that movement. Like, what? So why did they make the movement? They make the movement is because he's watching. What? Let's do something really weird. And they got his attention, and boom, he's down the rabbit hole. He's filing UFO sightings. He's running LA MUFON, and he's into the game. And they dragged him into this thing. And were you a pilot then, or were you? Okay, aerial school. I was just talking to Ray Hernandez. Ray Hernandez is another one. I may even do a book on this. The aerial school, you know, the 62 school kids, Rhodesia, 1994, the beings land, two girls, the one from Canada describes this thing, they're running along on these logs on the edge of the playground, and they're bouncing up and down, and all of a sudden, she sees this flash of light, and she looks beside her, and there's this gray being. He's hovering, but he's imitating them. He's just going along, and she's going, what the heck's going on? And all of a sudden, boom, the being's in front of her, and they're downloading this rapid image cycling. And these images are coming into her head, technological images. The girl beside her is getting all the environmental images, and they're just devastated. And then 4 years ago, she gets revisited by these beings, and is just totally blown away. Her life, she's just stressed out by this whole thing. Suddenly she's painting. She's painting all these paintings with all these symbols in the paintings. And she said the symbols are the most important part of the thing. She's done over 100 paintings in 4 years. So you see this thing. So why are they doing this? Do they actually have to come and land in a schoolyard? Or is this part of the acclimatization? So Ray gave me one from Colombia. I know there's a major one in Australia that involved 300 kids. There's one in Wales that involved a whole pile of kids. This has happened 20 times. So we're going to put this together. So why are they landing to kids? Like the next slide here is they'd land in Russia, in a park where all these kids are. And this was a worldwide story when it broke. It was all over the world. And it's just this raising of consciousness. It's making the kids go, wow, and they all draw it, and all the international media is there doing this sort of story, almost like the aerial school thing, which will be a big movie. It's coming out shortly, and it'll be a major movie that people will be watching, this aerial school with these little kids who are getting these download messages. Travis Walton. I tell a different story of Travis Walton. Travis Walton's incident happened same as mine. So people have this idea, why did they keep Travis Walton for 5 days? Oh, they hit him with his beam, and they killed him, and you know, they had to bring him back to life, and all this stuff. And I'm going, no, I think it's just the wow thing. They said, let's take a guy. He was one of the first ones. You've got to realize there was Betty and Barney Hill. There was a guy, a police officer in '67. There was Pascagoula in '73. Then there was Travis. There was really no abductions in reports in 1975. So Travis comes along, and to me, I envisioned the being saying, let's keep a guy for 5 days. Can you imagine the headlines that would create? That would be just fantastic. So they keep him for 5 days, and they put him out. And Travis, to this day, is still the most famous contactee in the world, the experiencer in the world. If he had only been taken for 2 hours, you never would have heard of Travis Walton. He is absolutely famous. And that's, to me, it's like, no, that's why they kept him for 5 days. They wanted to say, let's get them to go, wow, how did this happen? And it worked. 1897, if you think that UFOs are always the same, 1897, they were 85, or 95, 96, 97. They were flying around in wooden ships with propellers. Guys hanging down off of ropes. There was like no grays, no reptilians, none of that kind of stuff. It was completely different phenomena. And this went on, and there was thousands of these sightings. Then you go to World War II. And my father was involved. He's an Air Force pilot for the Canadians. And they were involved with these balls of light on the edges of the plane, these Foo Fighters. So it changes from wooden ships to Foo Fighters. And then you have this next thing that happens is ghost rockets. Now, ghost rockets, you probably didn't know, because it's a Swedish phenomena. I was at the big Swedish thing with 300 paranormal collections in Sweden, and I'm talking to the guy, and I'm talking, here's a video of him talking about the ghost rockets. It only happens in Sweden, but it happens every year. You have these rockets fly by and crash into lakes. Well, when have you heard that? It happens, and so here's him talking about this. And this guy has one sighting, or did they go all the way through?
We have sightings, of ghost rockets pretty much every year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Not that the last one that ditched into a lake, that was in 1999, as I remember. Wow. That was in the west of Sweden, close to the Norwegian border.
Is there ghost rocket sightings in other countries, do you know, or is it just a Swedish phenomenon?
It's a typical Swedish phenomenon.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
And you'll see that as I go through this. You think that if it's a random phenomena, it's going to be random around the world. This is not random at all. Green fireballs. So the Swedish rocket thing stops And then the green fireballs come. So suddenly you got these green fireballs over the nuclear power plants and where they're building the atomic bombs in the late 40s. And it goes on for about 3 years and then it stops. They go flying around and the U.S. is doing all sorts of investigations on this, trying to figure it out. And then the green fireballs. So where do the green fireballs go? I say, well, they're probably doing 1,000 planets at a time. And so they're on another planet that's 100 years before us. And after the green fireballs, then they're going to send in the next crew. And it's like, it's a crew. They just send them in, okay, foo fires, go to that planet. And then with green fireballs, you're going in after them. And they're doing it because the phenomena is changing. It's changing radically as we go through history. So then you get George Adamski and his 7 witnesses, 8 witnesses, whatever he had. And this occurs 9 days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb. The difference between the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb is the atomic bomb, you can't destroy the world. The hydrogen bomb changed everything because at this point, you can now destroy the world. So a couple days after, nobody was talking to aliens. I don't care what anybody says. There was really nobody talking to aliens between 47 and 52. As soon as the hydrogen bomb, then suddenly all these Adamski and Fry and all these guys all suddenly appear and say, oh, we're talking to aliens. These aliens are landing, they're giving us messages, the Space Brothers and stuff. It doesn't happen before that. It suddenly happens like that, and it starts up. So they're doing all this sort of stuff, and you have these weird-looking crafts. Not like what we see today, a different type of craft. And then you have the Phoenix Lights, was another example. So the question is, you have these Phoenix Lights, and people say it was a mile across, it was whatever, you could land, 20 747s on top of this thing, whatever. So whether it was the US government that was doing it, or whether it was the alien and the intelligence behind the phenomena, do you really need a craft that's a mile wide? And do you need to fly it 100 feet off the ground in Phoenix, Arizona? There was 10,000 people, and they just went, wow. It was a massive story. And you see this over and over again, that it doesn't make any sense what they're doing. You don't need a craft that big. They're flying around, and you start to say, what are they really doing? Now here's the grade 2 thing. This is where they drag in UFO researchers like myself. I had no interest in UFOs, none whatsoever. I'd studied near-death experiences, dying patients in hospitals. I was into Edgar Cayce and stuff, but I'd never thought about UFOs. And I won't get into the whole story, but the way I was dragged in, there was no doubt. It took me 35 years to figure out it wasn't a random event, and I'm going, that wasn't random. And there was a series of events that dragged me out there, that got me to go there. And I'd say that if you take a look at most UFO researchers, it's the same sort of thing. Then you suddenly get the beings, aliens, whatever you want to call them, suddenly start appearing to people. And they start doing this screen imaging thing, where they're appearing like this, like that. And I asked the guy who does all the humanoid sightings, a Cuban guy, I can never remember his name, but I asked him, he had 20,000 humanoid sightings over history. And I said, well, how many different beings do you think you've got in your survey? Like different, not, grays or, and he said at least 1,000. He said it had to be, I haven't counted, but it's got to be at least 1,000 different beings. So the question is, how did they all suddenly arrive here in the last couple of years? And why do they all look different? It's almost like when you see the screen imaging, I have a girl, we published her book, and she said it was Sherry Wilde. If you ever read Sherry Wilde's story, Sherry Wilde is dealing with this gray type being she calls Da, and she says to Da at one point, she says, are you actually an alien? And he went, no, I'm not. And she said, well, why do you come as this ugly looking gray thing? And he went, ugly looking gray thing? Do you ever look in the mirror? And she's got big teeth. She's got big white teeth. And he said, when you smile, we think you're going to eat us. And I've got a couple of experiences that I've talked to and that have actually asked the question, are you actually an alien? And there's the other point is that there's lots of reports of this. So it's a flesh and blood being, and it suddenly turns into a ball of light, and then it disappears. So the question is it a flesh and blood being, or is it a ball of light? And if it's a ball of light, does it eat bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee in the morning? And you start getting in, when you start looking really at it, it becomes a lot less physical than you actually think it is. It may be able to come into the physical, manifest a physical thing, but it may not be, it may be living in another environment, which is what the alien channeler Bashar here in Los Angeles always said. We come to you in your dreams, because now you're in our world. And the question is, are they actually from here? Or is this a lot of this screen imaging type stuff where they'll appear as rabbits and owls? I have a friend in LA here whose wife didn't believe in this kind of stuff. And he told me this only happened about 5 weeks ago. And he said she came screaming out of the bathroom and said, get in the bathroom, come look at this. And he went in and he said, there was a 5-foot owl sitting on top of the bathroom counter. And I said, 5? It was 5 feet tall? You always hear the 4-foot owl. I said, he was actually 5 feet tall? And he said, yeah, he was 5 feet tall. And he went right to get his camera, he came back and the thing was gone. So this is the thing, it's like, talk about going, wow. I mean, you're looking at this owl sitting on your bathroom counter, and then you get the shadow people. And there's been a bunch of arguments, what are the shadow people? It may be the same thing, where it follows experiencers around, and it's part of the thing, and it just makes the experiencer go, wow, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. The ball of light thing I explained already, the wolf at Skinwalker Ranch. Again, you get this thing, is it a physical phenomenon? So you have this whole thing, and the difference between Skinwalker Ranch and I do the Zendra thing. If you know, I do the Mission Rama Zendra thing. And they're both talk about portals. So you have the Skinwalker Ranch, everybody's walking around with 357 Magnums, you got ex-military guys, intelligence guys, the guy that owned the ranch was a hunter, he had all these big guns and stuff like that. And so you get this phenomenon where you have this giant wolf. The first day, this giant wolf comes walking up, and he's looking at this thing, and then next thing you know, he's trying to grab this cow and pull it out of the pen. And he takes first he takes a 2x4 and hits the thing over the head. And the thing just looks at him. And then he takes a 357 Magnum at point blank range and 6 rounds into this thing. And the thing still doesn't move. It still doesn't do anything. And then he gets a deer rifle and he starts shooting this thing with a deer rifle. And these pieces are flying off this big giant wolf. And he picks up the pieces of material, and it's all rotted. These pieces of stuff. So the question is that an actual physical thing, or is it sort of part between? And when you start looking at it, it's a lot less physical, because a lot of people think it's nuts and bolts. And one of the big downloads I got was, is the world made of little nuts and bolts, little particles? If it is, that's one world. But if consciousness is primary, it's a whole different world. You got to rethink everything, and that's the whole thing. The more we look at it, the more it looks like consciousness will be the ground of being. Consciousness creates matter, not the other way around. And that's what we're learning in ufology. It's not as nuts and bolts as you think it is, when you really start to look and seriously look at what people are reporting. So this is my favorite one. They come across the galaxy, all the way here. They land, and I can't believe this guy would make the story up. And he says, I need a pail of water. He gives him this thing. Go get me a pail of water. He came across the galaxy. And the guy goes and he gets a pail of water, and the guy flies off. And so the question is, I mean, did he really need a pail of water, or do you just want to tell this guy to tell the story? And that's what they're doing. They're coming from the bottom up to individuals. They're not going to the government. They're coming to the ground up, and the people are you tell the story, I tell you the story, more and more stories. And it's almost like African American rights, gay rights, or whatever. You say, well, when did they get their rights to be human beings? And you go, I really don't know when that happened. It was, I don't know, 80s or somewhere back there. And it's just going to happen. You raise the consciousness, and it just flips. And suddenly everybody sort of takes it for granted that this is actually going on. So they're coming from the bottom up through people. So grade 3 is the nukes. There's no doubt whatsoever. And the To the Stars has sort of twisted this thing and said, these guys are a threat. You know, they're shutting down nuclear missiles. And I say, a threat? If you can shut down nuclear missiles, you should basically cancel the Nobel Peace Prize for the next 20 years and give it to the aliens every single year. I mean, what better thing could you possibly do than shut down all the nukes? And it's like, and you've seen these cases like the Malmstrom thing. And the weird thing about the Malmstrom, there was an experiencer in the silo. The guy that was in the silo underground was an experiencer from childhood. And it's almost like I say, well, it's like a spy. They had their own guy inside the silo. And they come and they shut all the missiles down, and everybody's panicking, and the lights are really low, and the guys outside are freaking out. Oh, like, oh, this thing. And it's this dramatic thing. And they say, well, they didn't investigate it. Well, only they didn't investigate it. I guarantee you they investigated it. And the other thing was when they let it, in Russia, they had these ones where they actually let the thing launch, where the thing, they actually counted it down, and the guy said, oh, cow, and it missiles away, and it shows that the missiles have actually launched. And then they phone the headquarters and say, no, nothing launched. And I can just see the beings inside the craft going, I wonder if they got the message. You know, it's like, they're just, this is all messaging to me. That they're doing this kind of stuff, and they're still doing it. There was apparently one at Malmstrom just recently. The NORAD thing, the same thing. They come inside the nuclear weapons storage area, and they got the lights on. They're flashing the lights, and they're right low to the ground, and everybody's freaking out. The nukes in 1947, they started in 47, and I actually have a photograph, and I tried to find it. It's someone on some drive, I couldn't find it. But they're actually in 1947, when we dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. In Nagasaki, the Marines sent a team in there to look at the damage on the ground, and one of the Marines was taking photographs, just random photographs. In 1997, they were looking through these photographs, and here's the UFOs, clear as day. Daylight photograph over Nagasaki Harbor, a couple days after the detonated hydrogen bomb, and there's this flying saucer flying around. So they're very interested in nuclears, and you hear the experiencers will all talk about this. All the contactees from the 50s, this is all they were talking about. You got to stock the nukes. That was the story about Eisenhower. The story was, did Eisenhower have a meeting with Grays at Edwards Air Force Base? Total nonsense. If you're the Grays and you're abducting people, you don't need to sign a treaty. You can do whatever you want. Why would they sign a treaty? And if you did sign a treaty, why would you give the Americans high-tech weapons where they're going to turn around and try to shoot you down? It doesn't make any sense. The original story at that time, 2 weeks after, there's a leaked letter that said that what had happened was that the Aetherians had the encounter with Eisenhower, and they had said stop the nuclear weapons. They were levitating stuff across the table, and Eisenhower just said, we'll do what we want, get lost. That makes more sense than this idea of the Greys signing some sort of treaty. Grade 4, crop circles. Crop circles is a prime candidate. It's like, why do you have a crop circle? Because people go, what the hell is that? Wow, how did they do that? And then one more elaborate, and people don't know what's going on. They know there's some kind of message there, and all they're going is, wow, let's get pictures. And they got, picture books of these crop circles, and people just go one after another. And they're looking through this thing, and it's the same thing. If they wanted to tell you what's going on, they'd land and tell you what's going on. They're doing this indirect thing. They're making you think. You're going, I wonder what that message is. And people are arguing, what's the message in the crop circle? They're doing this sort of thing, and I'll show you how it starts. It's the old deal is that they're all different and tied into landing traces. So about the same time that the crop circle started, the landing traces stopped. I don't care what anybody says. Landing traces do not happen anymore. When I had in my book, book called Charlie Red Star, I had 10 landing traces I did in 2 towns in 1 year. It doesn't happen anymore. This is where they land, they burn out the grass, they leave the tried power marks and stuff like that. It doesn't happen anymore. It hasn't happened for 20 years. And then the crop circles come in. So you get the crop circles, and they're doing all these things. And the other thing that happened in the past is you have aliens outside of ships walking around. I had these when was doing my 75 stuff, walking around. That doesn't happen anymore. You don't have aliens walking around with little rods and stuff outside the craft, picking up rocks and stuff. That really doesn't happen anymore. That happened in the 60s and 70s. So here's the story of how the crop circle thing actually started. You may not know the story. It's a dramatic story told to me by Colin Andrews. He's told it a couple of times. It actually starts not in 1983 when he first sees his crop circle. It starts in 1977 with a TV broadcast. Colin Andrews is a communication expert with the British government. He worked with the British government. He has his first reel-to-reel tape recorder. He's got it in the living room. He's pulling the microphone across the carpet. The TV is going, and he's going to test it. And as he turns the tape recorder on for the first time, suddenly the TV just goes wacko, and an alien comes on the TV. And I think 2 million people in Britain had this on their TV. So he got it all on tape. He had turned the tape recorder. It's about 6 minutes. I'm going to play you about 30 seconds of it with the words. And you can see this is how it started. Here's the message that was on 2 million TVs in Great Britain.
We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world, so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course you must take to avoid the disaster which threatens your world and the beings on other worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the great awakening as the planet passes into the new age of Aquarius. The new age can be a time of great peace and evolution for your race, but only your rulers are made aware of the forces that can overshadow their judgments.
Now, the interesting thing about that was I talked to Colin later, and I think he's told this publicly, that there was an investigation. It was ITN was the TV that was shut down, the network, and of course everybody was inundated, the US and the British government, and they did 4 investigations or whatever, and Colin was involved in this. He said the only thing they were able to determine about what happened with those TVs, how this alien signal message came across, was the fact that there was 2 towers that they were blocked, that came through, that were taken over. And the 2 towers were the 2 towers that broadcast all the TV signals over southern Britain where the crop circles would appear 6 years later. That was the only thing that could determine those towers that broadcast to the area where the crop circles would be is the area that was affected. Metals. Now we get into the metal thing. Maury Island starts in 1947. And this is what I say. This is what convinced me that this has got to be what's going on. It's just this theory of wow. So in 1947, the Montreal incident, the thing's flying along, and it's just like the broken wing, the bird that's got the broken wing, and it's trying to get you away from the nest. So the UFO is flipping around, and everybody's, oh, it's going to crash. Look at this. It's in the sky. It's going to crash. And they're going on, and all of a sudden the thing stabilizes, shoots out this metal, and then flies away. This has happened, I don't know how many times, 10, 20 times. It's happened a lot of times where the same scenario takes place. And then the people go pick up the metal, and in the old days, it was called slag. They said, the guy made it up, it's slag, he got it off, whatever. And nobody believed it. But now we have the technology, and this is some of the stuff that To the Stars is looking at. And this is called extruded metals. The UFO is flying along, and they just, for whatever reason, and people say, oh, it's got a problem with the mechanics and has to shoot the metal out. No, it's evident. It's like a grade 5. So a grade 5 project. It said, we got the natives on Earth here, we need to get them a message, so what do you want to do? They say, oh, let's give them some metal. Let's mess with the isotopes on one. Let's throw that one out. And let's do this one, and we'll do this weird metal and this weird metal, because none of the metal is the same. It's all different. It's all different types of stuff. And why would it shoot this metal out? And it's happened quite a bit. So the Montreal, it started already in 1947 with the Montreal incident where it shoots this out. And the idea with the crashing saucer, is it rational to think that they come all across the galaxy and then to crash one after another? Or is this some sort of intentional thing that they're doing? Or is it a random event? The 45 piece, there's a bunch. I've tried to track all these pieces. Paula Harris has a piece. There's all sorts of people have these pieces that they've got. I've handled a lot of these pieces. And again, as I said, they're all different. There's two classes. So there's the stuff that gets extruded, that gets shot out of the craft. Then there's the stuff that supposedly comes from crash sites, where the thing crashes and they take the metal. So there's two different types of material that To the Stars is looking at. And I hear they've got 7 pieces, but there's a lot more than 7 pieces. And I have talked to people who've been contacted but haven't handed over their piece yet. This is the main one. This is this layered piece of metal, which they're saying, we can't do this. We can't layer this bismuth, magnesium, 1 micron, 100 microns, very, very thin, put down 1 atom at a time. And I say, well, actually in the world you can. Because if you look at the creation of a cell, one cell creates another cell. Everybody says, oh, it's just a random event. It's just a cell creating another cell. And I say, actually take a look at what's actually going on. You have a cell that's made out of 100 trillion atoms, and now it has to make a second cell, so it has to source 100 trillion atoms from somewhere, and it has to gather them, put them all together, put them in the right 3-dimensional spot, 100 trillion atoms, and it does it all in 16 hours. And it gives it life. And that cell can now produce other cells. So we can do it, which tends to indicate, you always hear the thing, most important part of the story now to me is this whole thing of the consciousness thing, that people who have been inside the craft and have flown the craft and stuff will tell you the craft is alive. So maybe this is how they're layering the metal. Is this actually being done like a biological process, that there's something else layering this stuff, and it's not being done by us. So this is the piece they have. This is their prime piece. It was called the Arts Parts piece, 1996. Linda Howe is in control of this, and she limits how long people can have the piece. So they're doing this analysis, and apparently the analysis on these 7 pieces will be available by October 25th, I think is the deadline. They had a 3-month period. So you may see this analysis of this stuff. And so they propose, you'll hear this stuff that they want to float this stuff, that if you bombard it with terahertz energy, which is what influenced the guys at Rendlesham Forest. They had the injured Peniston and Burroughs. They all had injuries. It came from this terahertz energy. And so the theory is, and it's not that they know this, it's a theoretical thing that came up with Hal Puthoff, that he had a theoretical thing to bombard this thing with terahertz energy and the pieces will float. This stuff will float. The thing is that they do not have a generator, either in the white world or the black world, that can create the terahertz that's necessary to bombard this thing. So that's where the standoff is right now. But they have this theory that if you bombard it, it will float. This is the help. Jacques Vallée did this lecture about 2 years ago at Contact in the Desert. This is where he lists all the pieces, and you don't really need to see it, because basically they're all different. This is where I sort of really got the idea. There's something going on here. Why are all these pieces different? Why are there no 2 pieces that are the same? This is where the analysis of the pieces are being done. This Selly Metallurgic Services. This is the piece that I've got. This is a piece that, if you've heard the story, there was a government official took Diana Pasolka, the head of religion and philosophy at University of North Carolina, to a site, and they blindfolded her and another academic and took them on this site. This is where this piece comes from. And it was my buddy that showed the government official where the site was. So I had this piece, and my buddy says, oh, you can keep it, I really don't need it. And then suddenly, about a week later, he said, can I have my piece back? He said, you can cut a little piece off. So I've got a little piece. I cut a little piece off. I'm really not that interested. It's in my drawer. But there's a lot of this metal floating around. This is the Bob White piece, 1985. Basically, 85% aluminum has this isotope thing that is very close to Martian meteorites. It has an isotope in it, has these bizarre things. It's been analyzed by NIDS. It's been analyzed in 15 laboratories, extensive stuff. And they were contacted by To the Stars, but they have not handed over this piece yet. The strange thing is that piece, 1985, was Denmark, 1947. It looks like exactly the same type of piece, the same sort of structure of the piece, and that piece was recovered. You don't have any analysis on that. Here's a story that shows you this thing. Is this a random event, or is this actually happening? Somebody's planning this. It was November of 2006. The following story was brought to Nick's attention by Pat Mason. On one summer afternoon in 1996, a Vietnam veteran named Bernie Foggin was living in rural central Ohio, southeast of Newmark, observed a large, dark, box-like UFO glide over his house at an altitude of 100 to 200 feet. The UFO was reported by Bernie as at least the length of a jetliner. We'll skip over that. As this noise ended, the craft passed over. Bernie heard a dull thud from somewhere nearby, but was transfixed by the dramatic object. It was only after the craft had vanished to the west over the tree line that Bernie thought to look for the source of the thud sound from a few minutes before. He discovered it lying in his gravel and dirt driveway. The material appeared to be a blob of solidified and still hot aluminum. So the craft flies by and it drops this thing, and he goes looking for it, and it's the same story. It's this extruded metal. They pretend they're going to crash, or they get your attention, and then they shoot this metal out and you pick it up. So now, do they have problems, or is this intentional? One of the things people don't realize, there's a lot of stuff. The Rendlesham Forest case. There's now claimed to be a piece from Rendlesham Forest that's being analyzed, and I think To the Stars has it, from the Rendlesham Forest crash. This piece of crash comes from a very famous experience, happened at Falcon Lake, Manitoba in 1967, near me, just outside my city. This is a piece of silver that was recovered, and this is the craft. This is the famous Stephen Mikulak case where the thing landed. He stuck his head in this thing. He's yelling for these guys, hey, Americans. Then he talked Polish and he talked Ukrainian. He could speak all these different languages. Nothing happened. He backed away. The thing started to spin around, and this sort of a vent thing burnt his shirt and left this burn pattern that would come back and forth through his life. It would disappear, reappear, and stuff like that. The thing was, they found this metal at the site in the cracks of this rock where this thing was sitting. So this metal stuff seems to appear. Now, did they have a mistake? Did they accidentally drop this metal? Or was this intended for us to find and go, wow, what is this? We got to figure this thing out. So there's a lot more metal than people think. Here's Wilbur Smith. I'm from Canada. So Wilbur Smith, the Canadian government, was actually being sent material by the Americans at a great rate. A lot of material was coming from the Canadians. Wilbur Smith actually stated that the Pentagon actually had a room in the 1950s where they had little pieces of hardware. It was like a museum, UFO hardware. And so they were sending this stuff to Wilbur Smith to do analysis, and I actually had a number of conversations with the metallurgist who lived near me and said, you know, I wish I'd never gotten in this, it destroyed my career and stuff, but he was doing the metallurgical analysis. Here's James Smith, who's the oldest son of Wilbur Smith, talking about this metal that was coming into Canada. So this has been going on for a long time. This metal isn't a new story. This is the 1950s.
Many times I do remember blue military cars pulling up to the house and leaving packages of things for him to do metallurgical analysis on. And we'd asked him what they were, and he said they were chunks that, unidentified things that the military had either shot down or found.
Unidentified things, or did he actually use the word flying saucers? Or
yes, yeah. On a couple of instances, I remember packages about the size of a loaf of bread coming in. The box would contain a chunk of metal that he'd been told that the Air Force had shot a chunk off of a flying saucer, and they'd already done some analysis of it. And would like him to have a go at it too. So.
Now, was this the American Air Force or the Canadian Air Force?
Well, I don't remember what color the plate it was, but I mean, it came from the States, whether it was delivered to the house by a Canadian.
Yeah, so he came from the States. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
You actually saw some of these pieces as well, Jim?
Oh, yes. Okay. I saw them when you unpacked the box and what's in there and take a look at it.
How old would you have been then?
Oh, well, looking 10 to 17 17 in my age group.
Did you get an opportunity to handle any of them? How would you know what was an unusual looking piece of metal at the age of
I got to handle
17?
a few of them. One was a chunk about the size of a brick, semicircular in shape, very smooth metal except where the jagged edges of where it had been disconnected from whatever it belonged to. It was quite heavy in terms of its size. He had analysis done of that one. I remember seeing that particular analysis sheet.
This is a statement made by a guy by the name of Groves. The Canadians were very close to a group in Ohio, a UFO group in Ohio. And Wilbur Smith was dying of cancer, and just before he died, they sent someone up to talk to him, and he was pretty open about what was going on. So here's Groves describing a little bit of what Wilbur Smith told him just before he died.
During the actual operation, however, of this, when Mr. Smith was on his feet, he was constantly visited by both Canadian government officials as well as American government officials. These were, of course, upper echelon people with attaché cases that were chained and locked to their wrists to make sure, of course, that none of the information was dropped or left behind in a station, a bus station or something. And so he had a number of these visits. They had samples they wanted him to analyze of hardware, that is actually metal that had been found.
And then he adds they had a lot of film as well. This is a piece in 1960 the Canadians had. They actually did analysis of this. It was recovered. There was a big explosion above the St. Lawrence River. These two huge pieces of metal were found on the edge of the river. Wilbur believed it was extraterrestrial. My friend did the analysis, the metallurgist guy. And it was actually analyzed by the Canadian government. We actually have the analysis of the material. There was actually a sample done by the Canadian government. This is the famous 252 piece that the CIA couriered. We actually know the name of the guy who couriered it, along with angel hair was in the box. And when it came, the piece was there, the angel hair was gone, because this angel hair just sort of fades away. This is the piece that was taken. And Wilbur Smith returned it to the CIA, or he said, I returned it to an agency, and the guy said, CIA, and he said, no, much higher than that, and wouldn't go into where the piece went back to, but he sent the piece back. This is an interesting story. This is the story of Uri Geller. This is a bronze piece, and the story is, as you all know, John Lennon had the UFO sighting, but John Lennon had a second sighting. The story happened, Uri Geller tells the story, he was invited to a restaurant, used to have coffee with John Lennon in New York City. They both lived there in the same area. And it was at that event that John gave him this piece, and this bronze egg type thing. And he said, I want to tell you a story. He said, the other night I was lying in bed with Yoko, and suddenly I realized there was it looked like the hallway was on fire. There was light coming from under the door through the door keyhole and stuff. And he was he's trying to wake up Yoko. He couldn't wake her up. And then he goes to the door and he opens the door and he said there was these effing bug people standing there. And so he tried to sort of attack them, and he said they forced him back just with their thought, to force him back. And next thing he knew, it was morning. He was on top of the covers. Yoko was awake, and he told her the story. So he finds this thing in his hand, this bronze thing in his hand. And so what he does is he goes and he gives it to Uri Geller. And he says to Uri, this may be my ticket to another planet, but I want nothing to do with it. And you can have it. And I talked to Uri about it. They actually offered to analyze it. Uri wouldn't allow it out of his possession. And I asked Uri the same thing, and he said, I've got it on my possession at all times. I keep it with me all the time, and I've never had it analyzed because I'm always afraid it might turn out to be made in Taiwan. So, but Uri stands by this story. And here's another one. This just happened, I don't know, a month ago or whenever it happened. This is a little sample, and it was extruded metal. It was an orb, an orange orb that was flying along, and my friend said, they don't extrude it, it drips, and it was dripping off this orb. So this orb's flying along, and this metal is dripping off onto the driveway, and you can see the metal there, and they recovered this metal. Now, whether to the stars, I'm pretty sure they're going to end up analyzing this, or they have analyzed it. But these pieces are all over the place. They're happening all over the place, where they're dropping this kind of stuff. The mutilations, people say, well, okay, now explain this one. What are they doing with mutilations? The first thing is they're bloodless. Why do they take the blood out? They take the blood out, in my opinion, because if they don't take the blood out, it's not very mysterious. They want you to go, how the hell did they get the blood out of this? We can't do this. It can't be us. It's got to be somebody else. We can't do this kind of stuff. So it's the first thing is that the whole phenomena is bloodless. The other thing is environmental. everybody thinks, well, you know, they're doing this horrible thing to cows. I always say, well, you got to take the cows. If I'm the head of the cow union and we're going to have a meeting with the cows, I say to the cows, okay, Mr. Cows, we got a problem. People are killing us. Okay, if you go with the intelligence behind the phenomena, 200 of you a year are going to die. If you go with the American Cattle Association, it's 41.7 million. So we say, well, we're justified. We can kill and mutilate and eat 41 million, but they do 200, and it's this evil. They got to be evil. Why would you do this kind of stuff? And they really don't think what's really going on. The whole thing with the environmental thing, majority of the top researchers, Linda Howe would be an exception, but the other, say, 3 major people are all saying it's an environmental monitoring program. They're not taking cows from feedlots, as far as I know. They're taking cows that eat the grass. They're watching the contamination. Perkins, who's one of the guys, the key guys, who has the big catalog, says all cattle mutilations happen downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities, from atomic testing, stuff like that. He actually said at one point, he said he got the thing with the cancer rates and the cattle mutilations. He said you put them on top, it's a direct match. The other thing is the NID study also believed it was cattle monitoring by somebody, and that it was tied to mad cow disease. The whole thing is people say it's the government. It's not the government. There's no chance the government would take the risk. I mean, we went in to get bin Laden with the top stealth helicopters, top equipment, top guys, and we crashed the helicopter. There's no way you're going to do 10,000 cattle mutilations and not crash a helicopter. They're not going to take the risk. Why would you not just go to the auction a week later and buy the damn cow? You're not going to risk sending helicopters in there to do this. It's easier to buy. So it would indicate that there's somebody else. And it does appear to be a monitoring operation. Most people would agree it's some sort of monitoring operation. And so it comes down to this good and evil thing. You see where they drop the cows. And this is the part that when people talk about cattle mutilations, they always leave half the story out. And I've talked to Linda about this, and I've asked lots of people about this. So you tell the story. Okay, it did this. It took the tongue. It did this. It took the eye. It took all the parts that would be contaminated. All the reproductive organs. If you're going to get the contamination, those are the youngest organs in the body. That's where you're going to have the contamination. So taking those parts. The question is, it's not 10,000 operations, or if you're going to send helicopters in there to do this, it's going to be 20,000 operations, because you take the cow, you do whatever you do to the cow, and then the question I always say to people is, why did they fly back into the war zone and drop the cow? Why would they do it? You've got the cow already, whether you're the government or whether you're the intelligence, you've got the cow. Why are you flying back and dropping this thing in the guy's front yard from 100 yards up? Because they want you to take pictures. They want you to go, wow, what's going on? And you and I may not know why they did that, why that's there, but I guarantee you someone in the government is going, did you see where that cow was? Did you see that? And they know there's this connection that people who study it will show that there's a connection. Here's one, 1975, the same year, with the highest degree, 2 mutilated animals were discovered near the entrance to the nuclear weapons factory in Rocky Flats, near Denver. And again, in August 1976, another animal was found at the entrance to the headquarters of NORAD, American Defense Command. That's a restricted air zone. So they came in and they just dropped it right out the front door and say, hey, look at this. It's like almost like your cat brings you a mouse, you know, the head's missing, and it brings you a mouse. Look at this, and drops it. It's a message. It's a calling card. There's no doubt about this. You don't need to, if you're doing it's the statement, if you need genetic material, you can go and pick the lock at the plant where they're processing and get all the genetic stuff you want. I don't think it's got anything to do with genetics. It's got this calling card thing. They're giving us a message. The environment, the nuclear weapons, all this kind of stuff. When you look, it never happens in any country that isn't Christian. Only happens in Christian countries. And Brahmin cows, there's millions of Brahmin cows. There has never been a Brahmin cow in the world mutilated. The difference between the Brahmin cow and our cows is we eat them. The Indians consider them sacred. And Chris O'Brien, who brought this statement up, said there's a religious implication to this whole thing. It's not as simple as people just mutilating cows. It never happens to Brahmin cows, which are considered sacred in India. Here's the abduction thing. Bud Hopkins, again, you see how Bud Hopkins thing started. Betty Hill, you have them, they were wearing hats. It's like this bizarre thing. It's like the different types of things that are happening. They're going through walls. They're doing this bizarre thing, and they're making you think. How do they go through walls? All these bizarre incidents where they can actually take you out to the door, but they take you out to the wall. And it's to sort of leave these messages. What's actually going on? I do the whole book on music and musicians. Ace Frehley, the head for KISS, tells his story, how he was abducted. He woke up in the doorway. I've woken up in a lot of weird places in my life, but not half in the door and half out the door. That was the weirdest place I ever woke up. And then he goes to the thing, he's looking for body puncture marks and triangles and stuff, and there's nothing. And he goes out in the backyard, and there's this burn circle in his backyard, 27 feet across. He said, that was my lucky number. So you get these type of things where it's much more complicated than it is. Why do they leave triangles on people's bodies? Do you really need to leave a triangle on somebody's body? Or is the triangle there so that when you wake up, you go, oh, it was a dream. And then you look at your hand. Oh, no, that wasn't a dream. It's the same thing. You don't need to put triangles on people's arms. It doesn't really accomplish anything. It's a calling card. It's a message thing. The Coronado incident where you had 13 people all taken at the same time. Why do they allow memory? If this is some sort of devious plan by the intelligence, why did they let you remember? Lots of people will say, it's time for you to remember. And suddenly the person remembers. Or they let this leak out in dreams, so you go for help and stuff. They want you to remember this. They want you to start telling the story. It's not a simple thing. This is my friend who had the Y mark on his head. This is a guy who was actually cured by a UFO, and he actually filmed it while it was happening by an orb. He lives in my city. He came to me and he described this thing. He said, why would they put a Y in my head? He woke up in the middle of the night, his hand was all bleedy. And I said, maybe they're trying to get a hold of you. Maybe they're trying to get your attention, and you wouldn't listen. So they said, let's give him something that he can't deny. Because until then, he didn't believe it was really going on. He didn't really believe that something was actually happening. Here's the most bizarre story that shows you this is not random. This is them doing stuff. This is the Allagash. The 4 guys, 1976, the year after me, they have this experience. They're on the Allagash River, and there's things there. They build this big, huge fire. They paddle out into the middle of the lake, and there's this UFO comes. They flash the light, as I did in 1976. If you don't believe flashing lights at UFOs causes them to react, you haven't been there. So it flashes, and this thing suddenly reacts and starts coming in, and they're paddling, and they're going back, and they get back to the shore, and the fire's out. And they think, that's kind of weird, but they never think about it for 12 years. The one guy has an accident. He falls through a floor doing a construction project. He's got this bad back. He can't sleep. He's in the hospital. And so he's in the hospital, and none of them know they've had this experience. They don't remember nothing. This guy has these weird, he can't sleep or whatever. So he says to the nurse, he says, 1988, he says, I'm bored. Go get me something to read. He's lying in the hospital bed. She goes down, and what does she bring him? Communion. She brings him the book Communion. And he absolutely flips out. Oh, look out. And what's the chances he brought communion? Then they bring in a psychologist to find out, why did this guy freak out? What's wrong? Why did he freak out? And he's like, I got these bad dreams. The guy was an associate of John Mack. Just happened to be an associate of John Mack. And then these 2 guys are twins. And nobody wants to touch the case. And he says, oh, Ray Fowler's coming through town next week. And he's interested in twins. He wants to do abduction twins. And that's how the story gets out. So the story gets out 12 years later. These guys all go tell this bizarre story. And they are allowed to remember. But you see this and you say, is this random that he just happened to see communion a year later? And if you don't believe communion was a trigger, all you have to do is go to the Amazon site under communion and look at the comments. And people will say, when I saw that book, I knew. He had a couple 100,000 letters. I mean, this was a trigger. Piles of people when that picture was shown. And it was actually not going to be called communion. It was going to be called Body Pain. And Whitley Strieber's wife woke up in the middle of the night and she was channeling with a male voice and said, we will not call it body pain. We will call it communion because that's what it is. That's why the title is Communion. It was going to be something else. But his wife had this channeling thing where they changed the title. This is the main one. And you're going to see this the next lecture after lunch. My friend Ray Hernandez is going to get into this. This is the key. I say you can look at all the UFO videos you want, all the government documents you want, all the sightings you want, all the medals you want. You will only accomplish one thing. This is very strange. Whether it's cattle mutilations, whatever, this is very strange. Something's going on, and I don't think it's from Earth. That's as far as you can go. And you can do that for the next 1,000 years, and you are not going to go anywhere. It is not until you talk to the people who are interacting with the intelligence that you're actually going to learn who are they, why are they here, what's actually going on. And this is the number 8. This is the lesson where they do the training. And this is the big stuff. So you get the training courses. And a lot of people will describe to me. The guy from Great Britain contacted me. He said, you got to stop. they're driving me nuts. I can't, I work. He's an IT guy. He said, I'm so tired during the day. They're making me go to these classes in the middle of the night. And I said, well, you got to talk to them and tell them to lay off or whatever. But he was just devastated. And a lot of people will report this thing. They're going to classes. In the middle of the night, they're being taken to these things and they're being trained to do this stuff, to levitate objects, balls. There's a woman that just died who told me, the first one to tell me she flew the flying saucer. And that's when I said, you flew the flying saucer? Are you kidding me? And I thought she was nuts. And she and another guy both told a story about being, as kids, being trained to levitate these balls. And they couldn't see the beings. They could just see the sort of the legs. They couldn't look up. But they had a blue ball, a red ball, and a yellow ball or whatever. And one was really easy to levitate, one was harder, and one was very hard to do. And they would levitate, these kids would all be sitting in a circle, and they would levitate this ball between the kids. So they have these training programs that you see them going through. Flying the craft. I have 14%, and this Ray's going to talk about the free Edgar Mitchell survey that they did of these thousands of experiencers, and in there, 14% of the people who answered the question said they've flown the craft. And as I said, 2013 was the first time I heard it. Pam Dupuis, who just died a couple days ago, I said to myself, you are absolutely, I'm thinking to myself, you are absolutely nuts, lady. There's no way. I said, did I let you fly the flying saucer? And she said, yeah. And she was in her 70s. She said, yeah, they let me fly the flying saucer. I've flown 3 different models. And I said, well, how do you fly a flying saucer? She said, you do it with your mind. And as soon as I said, because I got into the consciousness, had the consciousness download in 2012. And I go, well, that's why they told me to talk to her. And and now I've got 50 people. I've got Joe Burks is sitting right here. Joe Burks introduced me to a 747 United Airlines pilot. He told me the same thing. I'm flying along, I got my hand on this thing. You put your hand on the panel or on a ball, you become one with the craft. The craft is alive, and whatever you think, you can take your hand off the ball, whatever you think is what the craft does. You can go as fast as you want, wherever you want. Chris Bledsoe told me, you look at a cloud, you say, I'd like to go to the cloud, and boom, the cloud is right there. That's how it happens. And it's all mind. When you get, but you will not learn that until you talk to someone who's been in the craft, who's interacted with the intelligence. Then you start learning this kind of stuff. There's this highly important consciousness connection to what's going on here. So the flying the craft was a 14%. This one blew me away because I did a book called Inspired where I looked at all different types of phenomena, psychedelic, near-death experience, UFO encounters, and where people got inspiration, where they got downloads. J.K. Rowling, all the Harry Potter books, instantaneously came into her head, waking up from a nap, this kind of stuff. Where does the inspiration come from? And so when I heard this stat from the free stats, 40% of all people who have had an experience claim at one point during the experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. That's higher self. If you go into mystical material, that's higher self. They're talking to higher self. That's not something you're going to make up. I was on a flying saucer and I knew the answer to everything. And I would say, how do you know there's something on the far side of the universe? Number 7, 8, 9 they didn't tell you about. I had the download. I know what they're going to say. They're going to say, I really don't know, but I just know for sure. My download, the consciousness download, where I was told, this is all consciousness, and all these items came into my head. Put the pieces together. Absolute certainty. It's the hardest thing to describe. Absolute certainty. It's like Einstein, when he had the theory of relativity, the dream of the toboggan. And he said, I knew I had to understand that dream. And you could say, and I would say, that my entire career was based on a meditation upon that dream. It's this absolute certainty. You're pulling material that is much more accurate than you can get through the rational analytical mind. You're pulling the material down into here. And so 40% of all people claim they knew the answer to everything. And when they come back, then it's gone. They can't remember it, but they remember they knew at one point, knew everything. Or 21% said they knew everything about themselves through all time. They knew everything. 42%, and Ray, they've worked on this. They have a book called Beyond Consciousness, or Beyond UFOs, which I say is the most important UFO book ever written. And it's out here. Ray's got some copies here. Ray's going to talk about it. 42% say they've got mathematical, technical, or scientific material that's in their head they did not learn in school. And then you get the rational, analytical UFO people say, it's just anecdotal. They just believe they've. I say, even if you believe it's anecdotal, give them lie detectors. Do whatever you got. It's the same as a UFO sighting. Why would you not talk to thousands of people who say they've got mathematical, technical material, material that Ray will talk about, where some guy has this stuff and he's not even a physicist, and then you take it to a high-level physicist and he's going, oh my God, where's this coming from? It's even above him. So they're pulling this material down with this mathematical technical. This is extremely important stuff. 40% say they can heal people. after their experience. 54%, the number one message I say that the beings are giving is oneness. It's all connected. It's all one. Quit being division, you versus me, good versus bad, all this kind of stuff. It's all one. And this idea that love is the basis of the union. 54% of people who have had the experience will say they were talked to by the beings about oneness and love. This is critically important because this is something that these people aren't going to make up. This is not something on a ship that you're going to make up some sort of bizarre story about this. And they're all saying it's high numbers of people. 26% say they were talked to about reincarnation, which I say as part of my download last year, is it one life or multiple lives? If it's multiple lives, you've got to rethink a lot of stuff in this world. And this is the whole idea, reincarnation. 75% believe reincarnation is involved. 37% have had near-death experiences. That's 7 times the national average. So why are these, if it's a random event, how come this guy has a random event where he gets taken by a UFO and he has a random event where he has a near-death experience? Because you're believing it's one life. If it's multiple lives, it's all experience. You chose to be an experiencer. You chose to have a near-death experience. It's not a random event. And that's how you can explain how so many people, and a lot of them, I don't know if they've got the stats, but a lot of the people have had not just one, they've had 2 or 3 near-death experiences. It's just bizarre, the people that I have seen. So you take these stats. These are very important things to understand what's going on. 47% shadow people. The number one being reported is not a gray. It's an energy being, which shows you it's not as physical as you think it is. These beings may be coming from another sort of environment, less dense than ours, coming in here. They can become physical. We think it's just physical. You can't. And they can move back into their world. So the number one being is not a flesh and blood gray alien. 53% telepathic messages. 81% have had an out-of-body experience. That's just bizarre that these people would all have this. And this is thousands of people. This is not a survey of 10 people. 45% said they've been in the spirit world. They've been shown the spirit world. This is extremely important material, and we're ignoring these experiencers. They have the answers. And unlike the government won't tell you what's going on. These experiencers, if they believe you are not going to laugh at them, they'll tell you exactly what happened. They're not going to hide stuff. They're going to tell you exactly what they had. 76% have seen ghosts or spirits. Near-death experience, I did that. 67% have had a past life memory. So if the beings go back into your past life, then this is a little more complicated than just aliens coming here to, rape our women and eat our kids. 47% have with a deceased person. They report deceased people. They're talking to their dead people on the ship. So they have this idea of how does life work? What is death? This sort of thing. Extremely important things that we can learn. Now let's go. 29% have channeled a non-human intelligence. 83%, people always say, it's an evil thing, there's these bad aliens and whatever. 83% say, if you were to tell me that I could stop it, they'd say, no, don't stop it. Only 9% say it's an evil experience, and I would maintain those are people who just got into the experience. They haven't regressed. They haven't really looked at it. They're new to the whole thing. 9 experience, paranormal activity, 90%. This is my download experience, and this will get into what Ray had, the next speaker, had, when I had this download experience in Laughlin, Nevada. I was watching Colin Andrews give a lecture. A week later, Ray Hernandez has his experience, which we'll talk about later. I don't think that's random. Chris Bledsoe had his dramatic experience where he has this shining lady come to him exactly the same time. They all happen at the same time. So all these events, you see these synchronicities, all these things are linked. And so it comes down to what Ray's going to show later. I did this book called Inspired. It's all the same thing. And Ray put it in his terms. He sees the wheel, and you see all these different things. And we're parsing it. We're saying, OBEs, this is separate, and ghosts is separate, and the UFOs and Sasquatch. It's all the same thing, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Amazing, really. Thank you. Let's give Grant, let's give him a standing ovation because he's worth it. Just the enthusiasm alone. Thank you, Grant. That is a download. That was one of the most important lectures I've heard. So thank you so much for this. He says raise is better. So come back after lunch. We're going to take a break.